Welcome to this LEPC meeting regarding South Coast Rail. First, I want to have Lieutenant Ferris do the pledge allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First thing I'd like to do is Chief Bacon to say a few words on what we're doing here today.
Put me on the spot. Welcome everybody to our training facility. This is our classroom, as you've seen. This is our campus up here. We have our shop, our training tower, active fire station, our headquarters. We're happy to host here today. And if you have any questions and want to chat after, I'm here till 4 o'clock. That's it.
I'd like to introduce City Council Linda Pereira, who's here as well. And we're going to go around the room and just everyone's identify each of you, okay? So I'll start with me. I'm Richard Aguiar, Chief Inspector Services, Director of Emergency Management.
Deputy Chief J.T. Hoare, I'm in charge of operations at the police department.
Beth Fonts, Chief of Emergency Medical Services.
Linda Pereira, City Advocate. Captain Patricia Aguiar, LEPC Secretary.
Kevin Iman, Chief of Training.
Douglas Rosenberg, from the Fire Department, Right to Know and Hazmat Office.
Carly Medeiros, District Aide for Representative Carol Fiola.
Jean Fox, South Coast Rail.
Mike LaRuda, Deputy Chief of Administration, oversee training in mobile integrated health.
Tom Plough, Director of Facilities at St. Anne's Hospital.
Sadie Croft, Head of Security at St. Anne's Hospital.
Dennis Swift, Associate Safety and Emergency Management Officer for South Coast Health.
Tina McGree with South Coast Health Emergency Preparedness Committee.
Stacey Russo with South Coast Health Emergency Preparedness Committee.
Ken Furtado, Lieutenant of Fire Alarm Dispatch.
Doherty, Safety Manager of Boston Med Flight.
Todd Dennison, Director of Safety of Boston Med Flight.
Bill Church, Berkeley EMA.
Russ Horgan, Berkeley EMA Deputy Director.
Ron Odette from St. Anne's Hospital, the Administrative Director from ED and EMS.
Ryan Klein, Principal, St. Michael's School.
Lieutenant Duart, Special Services Division for PD.
Sergeant Cruises, Special Services Division for PD.
Billy Black, Captain of the Special Operations Investigations Bureau with the Fulton Police Department.
Bethany Ferguson, EMS Training Captain.
Amanda Lambert, EMS Operations Captain.
Justin Dagnall, Dayton Fire Department.
William Sutton, Public Works, DCO.
Jeffrey Karen, EMA Special Services.
Victor Farias, EMA Special Service.
Thank you all for being here. So this meeting is going to be about collaboration, unified command. In the event, which it may never happen, but we want to prepare for if we do have derailment at the track, what are we going to do at unified command? So we all know what we have to do: fire, police, EMS, perhaps the hospitals, med flight. But my whole goal of this today is for everyone to put a plan together and submit the plan to the fire department so we can do an SOP book. So this book here, which was pointed out, is the Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan for the City of Fall River. So this book is a living document. So we're getting updated with different changes in the book. So what I want to do is make a plan such as not as elaborate as this one, but such as this one. And this is the railroad plan that I was required to put together for MEMA. There's an addendum from here into here as well, a smaller version of this. What this plan has evacuation zones where we're going to get into the areas. We can share this all with you guys as well. Where we're going to do staging, which we're going to point that out as well. If in fact we have to evacuate one particular area in the city, which we're going to try to keep everyone sheltered in place, unless we have a catastrophic situation where we have to actually, and Jean can speak to this as well, if we have to evacuate everybody, the plan is here, where to go. We don't want that to happen because it'll be chaos, but if it does happen to happen, we have plans in place for everything. Once again, as the EMA director, I'm required by MEMA to have plans in place for such an evacuation. So we also have Mass Coastal Railroad train that comes through the same tracks. that train carries hazardous materials to boarding Remington. We've always had a plan in place for that. And Mr. Klein is here, he can attest to that. At St. Michael's School, in the event if we have to evacuate the school, what they're going to do, so forth. So every nursing home, daycare center along that track route, prior to South Coast Rail, when we had Mass Coastal Rail, every entity who would have been involved with that had that plan in place, what to do, what not to do. So in emergency management and LEPC, we mitigate a problem before it happens. And I just, feel as though that if something should happen on the tracks, once again, not the repetition, we all know what we have to do. But let's collaborate, let's have a plan in place. And that's the purpose of this meeting. I have just point this out because this is a public meeting. I had to get it signed by the clerk, and I had to send a letter to the mayor. I have to say this LEPC regulations. It's on the agenda, so that way we're legal. Captain Agia from Special Services, she's the deputy director, EMA as well. She's taking notes, so we have to do notes for this meeting, take notes, send them to MEMA with all this documentation that we're doing today. So it's an effort with everybody here. That's why we have everybody here today. So unifying command, if you don't know what that means, all agencies working together under one roof. We will have an incident commander, and most likely it'll be the first arriving district chief, or Chief Bacon arrives on scene. He will take over as an incident commander of fire, police, EMS. But unified command means everybody works their own team, but under one guidance. That's how that works, incident command. We'll also, if we have a catastrophic situation, we'll follow incident command chart. We all know what that means in public safety, right? So this is what we're following. What we want to do is set up a command center. We don't know where that will be, but we have areas we can point out on the screen where we may have incident command, triage tents, and so forth. So the planning of this meeting is to how we're going to do all this stuff. If we have a situation on Essex Street, next to St. Michael's School, we shelter in place. What are we going to do with these kids if we have to evacuate them? So that's a simple, Chief Baker can attest to this because this happened and he knows this. If we have a catastrophic situation in the city and we have to evacuate a school, we have an agreement with the bus companies through this book that Serta Bus, Cozy Bus, Aruda Bus, Amita Bus, they have to respond to the scene. When they respond to the scene, we put the kids on the bus, and Chief Baker can speak to this as well. They get the kids on a bus and to a different location. The location that we usually will use is Drift High School. So, Chief, you want to speak? You were there, so you were the district chief. You can attest what happened here.
Yeah, so we saw that plan and work at, what's the school, Laterno?
Laterno.
On Anthony Street, when they were developing the South Coast Marketplace. They were doing some demo work on the rear side, digging trenches for new services on the rear of what was then the Harbor Mall. They hit a stub on a gas line that wasn't marked, and it was a high-pressure gas line. I showed up to a large volume of natural gas emanating from the area where they were digging, and the wind was blowing directly at the school. I called Chief Aguiar over the radio and then followed up with a phone call, and within 20 minutes the school was evacuated. The kids were walked down to, was it St. Peter? No. The Catholic school down the street, and then they were bused from there very efficiently and rapidly. So the SRO on the scene at the time had told me within 15 minutes of me being on scene that not only was the entire school evacuated, but the kids were also in transport to Durfee High School for a dismissal. It's the first time I had been a district chief at that point for a number of years. I've been on the job for 23 years, and I can't remember another incident like that happening. So it's just testament to a well thought out plan, and Chief Aguirre staying in communication and with those bus companies, and I think it was CERTA did a lion's share of the transporting on that scene, so.
We got 800 kids transported in between 15 and 20 minutes to Deerfield High School. We had police escorting the buses so they won't get cut off. And then one of the things that we all can relate to is social media on Facebook. When something goes haywire, everybody's on social media, come get your kids at the school. Blah, blah. So, believe it or not, we had all the kids out of there before the parents even got to the school. So then we told the parents, go to Deerfield High School, that's where the kids are. So, plans work when you have them in place. Plans work when you coordinate correctly, when you have the right people in the right places. There was an effort between school department, police, fire, EMS. We all worked as a team, unified command, and we got the kids from point A to point B safely in 15 to 20 minutes. So our goal, my goal is, as the EMA director, is to have plans in place for the railroad, such as if an incident should happen. It may never happen, but we have to have plans in place. So, Chief Bacon has his plan in front of him, the draft plan he'll speak to. And what I would like to do is I want to have everybody speak after Chief Bacon about what they think they would do in the event that there's a railroad derailment. So Chief Bacon drew up a draft plan, and he can speak to that as well. We have Chief of Training as well. If he
A
wants
bunch
to
of
speak.
copies of this. I think it'd be easier if everybody has a copy of this in front of them. Do you mind?
You have a copy, I've already written on this.
Yeah, I got a clean copy right here. So honestly, when I was thinking about this meeting, we have an MCI plan, but we never have all of the stakeholders involved in it in the same room. So I think that this meeting can help us draft, not just for the train, but with the major highways we have coming through the city, with the amount of school buses and that we have every day in the city. I think that this meeting can really help us out to draft a good MCI plan. Now, that might involve the railroad, but doesn't necessarily need to, right? So one of my goals out of this is to come up with an MCI plan that we can then alter towards the railroad for any incidents that might happen there, but also utilize in any kind of a mass casualty incident in the city. So when I drew this up, this was specific for the railroad, but I think a lot of what we're gonna pull out of this, and hopefully within a few minutes, he can have that back for you. Because my goal with this was to have two different scenarios. Two different levels. The initial level, and then a large scale. So the initial decisions made on any of these scenes are really gonna dictate the outcome, whether it's gonna be a positive or negative outcome. And then the large scale will be worst case scenario, right? How big does this need to get? What do we need to have as far as divisions, an EMS division, the police, for everybody, for MedFlight to have their place in this. And then we can take that initial, everybody's gonna know their role and what's expected of them at the beginning of the scenario, and we can let it grow up to what it needs to be, not necessarily the largest, but somewhere in between. And we can have the most effective plan for any mass casualty incident in the city. So that's kind of what I'm gonna look for, and I can send this out electronically. I think you all signed in with your emails, but if everybody wants to take notes on this and then get back to me with what you think your role could be and where you fit into this a little bit better, and what specifically, I don't know what all of you do, right? So what specifically you can provide and how you see this happening. I sent this out, a couple weeks ago, Chief? We got some feedback on it, and I did a bunch of research on rail-specific incidents. FEMA's done some studies on rail-specific incidents, and it's stuff that you really don't think about, right? Like scene security, because people are just gonna show up. It's gonna be on Facebook before we get there, right? So people are just gonna show up, whether they be off-duty firefighter, off-duty nurse, doctor, that are showing up with the best of intentions, but create chaos on the scene. So one of the first things we need to do is secure that scene. Have an area where people can formally check in and be vetted before we utilize them. We need that for accountability, and we need that for patient care, right? This is gonna be an intensive EMS operation, right? So EMS needs to have their branch that they're gonna need to be boots on the ground all the way up to notifying hospitals, deciding who gets transported where, right? Really, so multiple triage areas, multiple apparatus, staging areas, right? So we have to have a staging area just for EMS, where the ambulances and whoever else, it doesn't need to be. You might have some green victims, right, for triage that are transported on a bus, right? So, so there were a lot of things in reading that jumped out at me that I said, okay, I hadn't thought of all of this. So I think this will be a great exercise today. I should have made enough copies for this, for everybody, but it shouldn't take long, and Doug will be back with that. So, does anyone have any questions for me leading up to this? Any comments?
Have you made any thoughts to like follow up, like training events? Like, are they going to be large scale training exercises to actually implement some of these MCI plans? And what's the follow up look like year on year to stay current on this?
I think that's huge. I think it's something that we need to train once we work through this with Chief Aguirre. I think we absolutely have to, I would say at least once a year on different scenarios, train on this, right? While we can start the ball rolling on any MCI and see it to a successful end based on a single plan, every one of them is going to be different, whether it's at a school, whether it's on a highway, or whether it's at the train, or anywhere in between, right? So yeah, I think that's probably the most important thing that we can do, because we could talk about it, we could put it on paper, but actually seeing it is when we're going to work out the kinks, right? And make sure that everything works properly.
And I think that's the purpose of this meeting, what the chief just mentioned. And we have the hospitals here, so if we have to do major transports, how are you going to handle this stuff? So this will all be in this plan. And once again, I know, we all know what we have to do, but I think it's important that everybody has their plans in place. If in fact we have a major situation, there's a declaration paper that I have to send to the mayor. I describe what's going on in the city. He signs it. I send it off to MEMA. Why do I do this? In the event if we have a situation where we're going to need federal funding, this is already the first ball that's rolling to get the federal funding in place. Every time we have a disaster, I normally do that. We had the fire on Irving Street a few years ago during that major snowstorm. It was a disaster. We had overtime come in. We lost equipment. We lost hose. We lost a lot of stuff. And I made a declaration. We put the reimbursement in, and I think we got over $250,000 in reimbursement from the federal government. So declarations do work. All this stuff works. It just has to be the puzzles put together. And once the puzzles put together, we just send everything off. So, start with the head table, Chief.
Medeiros, you have someone at the front window. Jeff Medeiros, you
Chief,
have someone at the front
we
window.
do have a situation. What would your comment do?
Obviously, we're gonna probably be one of the first people on scene with our response time, so clearly identifying and providing information to central dispatch, so the units that are responding from the other branches of first responders will understand what we're working with. Chief Bacon already said this, we've had a conversation, it's really about perimeter, setting a perimeter. Obviously, if there's injuries right there, we're gonna try to do any life-saving measures we can, but I think more importantly, it's to set the perimeter so that the professionals that are coming in from the EMS side and fire side can do any type of extricating and life-saving measures that need to happen there. The other piece that comes up for us is any evidentiary value. There might be a criminal aspect to the incident, so we're going to want to create scene security, potentially have detectives respond to the scene for any evidentiary issues. We'll more than likely notify our state partners for state police to come in and help as well, because depending on the size of the disaster, it could be beyond the scope of what we can handle with what we have for personnel. So we might be in like an all-call situation where we're having all hands on deck come in. So I think it's important to identify the points of access that we have, to speak about that today in this meeting as far as the gates that we can get down to certain areas. Because there's a potential that the accident could happen remotely. So we have vehicles that can get out there as well as EMS and fire, but identifying the quickest way that we can get to certain areas if it is a remote incident as well.
We do have some photos of that when Chris comes back. Chief Watts, how about you?
Our initial evaluation is gonna be the scope of the incident, how many people are we looking at, how many patients, how much of our own resources are we gonna, if our resources are gonna be tied up, how do we take care of the rest of the city of 87,000 people, because medical emergencies still happen every minute. And then the other side of it is we have to talk to our local hospitals and see how many people they can take, what is their capacity, at what level. So we're trying to actually develop a process where we can use a regional dispatch system, develop a strike team, so that way all that stuff is kind of done without drowning our own dispatch center, which is going to kind of be inundated with tons of phone calls. We're going to have to worry about family. We're going to have to worry about security and maintaining everybody's privacy and dignity, and maintaining your own first responders, make sure that they're safe. So we will, we have 10 ambulances in the city right now, both on both sides, but it's going to be how many of your resources can you dedicate to an incident, and then have to worry about the people, your population. So it's a lot to really think about, how many patients, how many are life-threatening, how many need to get to a trauma center, do we have access to med flight? There are so many concerns that we have access, but do you have access to us, I guess is more the situation. And really trying to work well with our healthcare providers, because if we inundate a hospital, then that really doesn't do us a service. And how many patients can be transported a further distance and be treated still with the same care that they require? So it's really a lot, and I'm sure that we're up to the task. It's just how big is the incident and how many people are we talking about, and trying to make sure that the welfare of the patients and the welfare of the families and first responders is taken care of.
Mr. Kerr, how about on the city side? What to expect? We need resources. It's going to have to get paid for. So we need resources. How do we go about that?
When it's an emergency situation, you always find the resources to do what needs to be done. The concern that I would have, and I never thought that this was like, I'm just talking about the train, if something happens on the track, where does that happen? And if it happens in the Taunton area, are they responsible? Are we then mutual aid to Taunton? Or are we trying to work all together? If it happens in Attleboro and it's a devastation, even though we're further away from Attleboro, we still provide mutual aid to our county. Or if it happened in New Bedford, have all the chiefs of police of Bristol County met to talk about what happened? And I think I would pose the question to Jean, if you know, if you don't, does any community along the rail have a plan in place if something should happen that you're aware of?
I know Freetown put something together.
I could take that if you'd
Okay.
like, Jean.
Go ahead,
So
Jean.
I'm a member of the Bristol County Fire
Yes,
Chiefs.
yeah.
So we have an association that dates back a long
For a
time,
long
and
time.
we meet monthly. The train has been on the radar. I came in on the late stages of it, right? So I can tell you that not only are there plans in each community, there are mutual aid agreements in each community,
Okay.
and there's shared resources from each community. I know Freetown has a mass casualty trailer that is intended to, it's designed to be on subway systems or train systems, the way you can transport a number of patients on litters. And New Bedford and Fall River got a lot of the extrication equipment from the $900,000 MBTA grant, where they funded all of this equipment. There's a number of ATVs and UTVs that were part of it. So my first game plan, and if you start here with the situational assumptions, when we look at 25 to 100 victims, anytime that we know that there's a derailment, before we even know how many victims we're calling for mutual aid right away. These incidents aren't going to be happening 5 times a year. They might not happen 5 times in our lifetime. So you call for as many resources as the situation could potentially need. You get them rolling, and you're happily to cancel them if you don't need them, right? So because of the delay time, the natural delay time and resources responding, our plan is to call right away. We'll notify through Bristol County Control that we have an incident on our tracks, and we'll ask every fire department in Bristol County to send the resources that they have for any kind of a rail incident. I know that through CMed, I would suggest starting the MCI trailer with a cache of supplies needed for up to 100 victims. There's multiple of those in the area, and we would get those rolling as soon as we could. Just like we do in the fire, and every day in the fire service, if we have a report of a structure fire and we get calls on it saying, there's flames blowing through the roof, our district chiefs will call for more resources right away, and we'll send them back if we don't need them, right? That's essentially the job that we do. So you can rest assured that we have been, the Bristol County Fire Chiefs, this is the command anyways, the extrication, a lot of this is going to rely on the fire departments. So we've been on top of making sure that this was gonna happen and that we would.
So far in all the years that I've been around, the mutual aid with all the communities, as well as Fall River providing mutual aid, has always been something very positive, within Bristol County. It really has
Yeah.
been. One of the things I'd say, I know that the sheriff had that command center, and
I forget where that went, it's not with him anymore, but Department of Fire Services,
You gave it to New Bedford.
New Bedford Fire has it.
Oh, okay.
MEMA has a ton of
Yeah, we have all the
resources.
resources.
Department of Fire Services has a ton of resources. So we would call for,
and we have both of our helicopter pads, or either at Kennedy Park or at Charlton. To get
yeah, I think, and we could talk to MedFlight, but I think it would
Yeah.
probably make sense to utilize North Park, the secondary landing site, as a transport area as a designated transport area, like at least start with that. If there needed to be something closer, we could figure something out, but that's something that you guys have as a secondary for Charlton. We utilize that often. So that's probably where I would look to at least initially, to have MedFlight stage and then if we needed to, we could utilize Kennedy Park as a secondary one. But I know that we've had you guys land on highways, we've had you guys land even closer, right?
It all depends on the situation.
Yeah, right,
If
and
it's a hazmat, what's the prevailing winds, all those kind of things, we would factor in.
Yeah.
If it was a multiple helicopter event, if you had multiple patients you wanted to move from our partners in the NIA system, we can bring 16 helicopters in here in 90 minutes for Utopia. So in a situation like that, if it was a multiple helicopter event, New Bedford Airport would make more sense.
Yeah.
Depending on what the situation is, and depending on what the scenario is, that's something that we'd have conversations with Incident Command about, of what makes sense for multi-helicopter. Or we would stage them off-site, let's say at New Bedford, and then pop them over to an individual scene, location, LZ, things like that. So it all kind of depends on what the situation is and how many patients you're looking at moving.
Yeah, that's great information.
The other piece is for us is we're outside the CMed system, so in the sense that when you call us, CMed doesn't determine where we take the patients because of our agreements with the Boston hospitals. So it's an easy, the patient we take, you don't have to worry about it anymore in that sense, and you don't have to get a bed assignment from CMed and things like that. We can just take them and decompress the region, right? Either go to Rhode Island, go back up into Boston, things like that. So it kind of reduces a little bit of workload from an EMS transport triage standpoint.
And this is the information that we're looking for.
So for a family, I'm sorry, go ahead.
In the folder such as this. Just to piggyback on Linda for one moment. We've been having planning meetings about 3 years now, Gene, 2 years? So we've been having 3 years, public safety meetings in Freetown, with different fire chiefs from every railroad town, every town where the railroad is going to go through. So we have plans, and we're working on strategizing and plans in place. So this is nothing that we're just picking up now. This is something that we've been doing for the past 3 years, going to these meetings. As EMA director, I've been involved since the inception of all these drills and meetings. We've also had a hands-on drill in Freetown, just to give you an education. Most people who are going to go on the railroad, you have to take an online test to even be certified to go on the railroad for an emergency situation. And then after the online test, you pass that, you have to go do a hands-on training. So most public safety people who are gonna deal with that stuff has had the training or are going to, I think we're certified now, right, Chief?
That was just
That was
so
just
the
for the
online
drill.
was just to be able to do the drill.
You
But
couldn't
it
do
was
the
a-
drill unless you
Yeah.
had done the 2-hour
Right.
online.
Yeah.
Just generally speaking, if people are anywhere near the railroad tracks, you're supposed to have that railroad workers protection thing.
Protection thing,
You don't
yeah.
need that in an emergency. You
Right,
you
right.
take care of the emergency.
So why don't you speak to that, Gene? About the railroad?
RWP?
Yeah.
Well, I have to do it all the time. I have to do it for Amtrak, MBTA, the freight operator. And basically, it's how you stay safe on the railroad tracks if you have to be out there. And there's different ways of doing it. They have, and we've been doing it because we're still out on the tracks, putting in snow blowers. But now we have active trains, right? So there's different ways to make sure those workers are safe. So if you needed to go out just routinely, say you decided part of what you wanted to do was regular inspections on your part, then I would suggest you go for this training. It's not too strenuous, it's only good for a year, it has to be repeated annually. But it covers everything from how many feet away from equipment you're supposed to be, to how the foul zone, so it's usually 4 feet from the end of the tie on each side. If you're in that, you can get hit by a moving train. People don't understand, they see the tracks and they think I can get up close to the tracks, but remember the trains overhang the tracks substantially. So that's what that course is all about. But for the drill,
Yeah,
we
we
had
had-
everyone do all of that online training, and then we spent quite a while developing a scenario, which the folks that were going to be responding were not tuned into. So for the Freetown one, and we did one in New Bedford as well, we did a strike, a car strike, and a minor derailment with a small fire in one of the coaches. And it was mutual aid, everybody came, and what we ended up doing was, it was Chief Ashley at the time, kind of figured out he was going to be the commander, he figured out what everybody needed to do, he deployed people, and we got everyone off. We had victims, I can't remember how many, but they were all, all the different colors, they were all there. Triage took place, no transport. But we did all of that and came out of that with a report on where we did really well and where there were some shortcomings. So I think we should take that off, dust it off, and consider it as part of this as well, because there were some things, I think, with the communication piece that could have used improvement, and part of that was just because it was Freetown. But there were some other things, and we found out that the striker chairs don't go down the aisles of the new coaches, because they're about 1 inch too wide. So little things like that, which had nothing to do with the response, did become evident when we went through these drills. So we're also going to continue to do some hands-on, just so everybody who has to deal with any kind of incident, whether it's mass casualty or nothing of that magnitude, you know what button to push, how to shut everything down, which windows you access if you have to extricate. All of that stuff can be done in an hour on a locomotive and a coach. So I know we're planning at least one or more of those. We know that there's turnover in departments, we respect that, and people need refreshers as well.
At the last safety meeting that we had, we discussed about having another one in 3 to 4 months.
Yes, we're still doing, I actually sent an email on that yesterday, Chief.
To go over some of the stuff that's been happening that.
Yes, we need
Crazy
to.
stuff that's been
And
happening.
by the way, I'd just like to point out, that was your suggestion.
Oh, thank you.
So Gene, I'm glad you mentioned communication. I think that's probably going to be the most important determination of success in a situation like this. Not just communication between the responders on scene, but communication with the hospitals. Your ability to be able to, because we can lay out the best plans and say, we're gonna send you 50 patients. And then 5 minutes after we tell you guys that, 50 patients show up in cars that are self-transport, right? And then that communication needs to be, okay, so it's gonna be a lot of communication back and forth with a lot of the other agencies to determine what the best course of action is. And we're gonna have our own communication issues on scene, right? We'll come up with I call it a fireground channel, right? Because that's what we're used to. But a channel to use for communications on the scene that doesn't clog our dispatch channel, which should only be used for transportation and for major announcements to dispatch, right? So That all becomes part of this that hasn't even been entered into this draft yet. Right? So, but not just communication with us, but communication with all the external stakeholders and making sure that there's an effective and open and clear pathway for communication.
So communication is, like the chief said, that's a really tough thing. So at MEMA, we have the resources in MEMA in Bridgewater to have a communication trailer brought down here. And that gets activated through me as EMA director. I just make a phone call, they send it down, and we can communicate with every hospital, every police, everybody in the area we can communicate with. The tower goes up, and we'll have good communication through that. We've tested it many times, so we know that it's worked, and it will work. They send their own people down to do the actual communication in that little trailer. So the communication trailer will work for us. Then we can have, if in fact that we have to, we have a command tent that blows up 20 by, what is it, 20 by what? 30. So we can use that as a command center. In EMA, we're talking about setting up triage tents for Chief Francis' team. So we have plans in place, and we're going to have plans in place for all of this. Hospital, what would you expect from us, and what can we expect from you guys?
I think, go back on what the chief said, you know, our kryptonite to our superpowers is communication. And I think we, you know, in this role, you know, doing it for the last 3 years, one of the big things that's kind of fallen to the wayside is personal, you know, interaction with the fire departments, the police departments. So we have MOUs, but they're outdated. We talk from time to time, but it's never face to face. So I think not knowing who you're calling or who you're talking to makes things difficult when you're expecting to receive patients from any kind of incident that happens in the towns. So I think fostering those types of relationships and meeting on a regular basis like we are now, knowing who I'm talking to. I mean, I know you for a long time, but I don't know a lot of these others. And so, you know, now I know who I can reach out to. Now, putting this into play, having a list of the names and their contact phone numbers in my plans, and South Coast plans, I think is really important. So communication is, in the hospitals, we can take care of patients, right? You're gonna bring us 50, we're gonna take care of 50. We'll figure it out. We have the capabilities. You know, once we figure what the source is, if it's an MCI trauma, if there's chemical involved, if there's biohazard involved, then we have to kind of ramp up our game a little bit, but we have that capability now. So if you're telling us what you have and what's coming our way, we can take care of those patients, but we need to know what we're getting ourselves into before it happens.
Yeah, I mean, we have communication problems all the time. I mean, even if we're going to talk to different towns for emergency management issues, Chief can testify for that back there. Russ, it's tough to communicate between all of us, right, Chief? So, I mean, it's communication is tough. Mr. Audette, you're the expert. You're the firefighter, EMT. You Brown University. So, what's your take on all of this?
I was gonna have Tom respond.
Oh, okay.
I think similar to Dennis and the work that they do at South Coast is, you know, we'll stand up and do what we need to do with our partners within our system. But the secret to our success and the ability to care for these patients is the notification. You know, as much information as we can, because then we can understand what we're going to scale to, how many resources we're going to bring to bear. So I think that's the largest piece here, and whether that happens initially through CMed or through the Incident Command Center, and then that continued communication through the incident, as it is very dynamic. You know, Chief, you mentioned those self-reporters. That's very, very common in an incident, and you know, we may need to take a pause for 15, 20, 40 minutes while we've got an influx of patients that we're trying to triage and manage, and then report back to Incident Command that.
Would you have the resources to send somebody to the scene to facilitate some of that, or do you think it works better? I'm just curious.
I think on a large-scale incident, I think the success depends on that communication. And if you've got an EMS sector, a transport sector, that we could certainly, as an institution, commit someone to that incident command center so that they don't have to make a phone call. They can turn and say, can you take 7 more?
Yeah, even in the transport,
Yeah.
right? The patient
Especially if
transport
it's a-
area, to have a presence there so that you can see the actual patients that are being transported to your facility and give more detail than, because, listen, we're not going to initially have enough people no matter what, right? You never have enough people on an MCI initially. We are not New York City or Boston where we can have 1,000 people on scene in 15 minutes, right? So any resources like that where, let's say, the EMS chief is responsible for the transport area. He's Chief Root is taking over patient transport and deciding which patients are gonna go to St. Luke's, Boston, Rhode Island. If he can say, I'm sending 20 patients your way, you can get eyes on them and make that call. I think it would be huge.
And then we can communicate with our patient care supervisor.
Exactly.
Our incident commander, because the reality is what we're gonna do on our end is stand up, our HICS, our hospital incident command system, an internal disaster plan at our facility, which really has to, dovetail with what you're doing, but really kind of remain separate. So I think that would make perfect sense.
Yeah, so I think Lieutenant Furtado, our dispatch lieutenant, is going to play a big role in having those names, putting together this MCI list of who we should be calling right away. Who is the contact, right, to get somebody on scene to make that happen. So I think the more information that we can put together and the more information that they can have in the dispatch center, because they're going to get overwhelmed in a flash at the dispatch center, right, Lou? I mean, how big can this get before?
Right, so like at a typical, let's just compare it to a working fire. We have 2 call takers, 3 dispatchers. On a working fire, typically what they'll do is they'll pull someone over to assist with the dispatch. Because let's face it, when these situations happen, the rest of the city isn't stopping. There's going to be other incidents that occur. So balancing all that, having the resources organized in a way where we can, send them out and get the proper authorities involved would be very important.
I know what alleviates sometimes, because we did a large MCI drill at the New Bedford Airport. It was actually a few years ago, where a lot of those individual transports aren't actually being called through fire alarm. They're actually being called, they're being tracked on scene so that there's a transport officer that actually knows where all these patients are ending up. And then those get reported after the fact to fire alarm. That way there is someone responsible to, as far as family accountability, so everybody knows where they're going. And then even on the hospital end, those ambulances aren't calling individual CMED reports for every single patient. You get one person at the scene that's actually calling in saying, Charlton, I'm bringing you 4 patients, 2 of them are green, 2 of them are yellow, significant injuries are these. That way you're getting 4 patients. That way you don't have 4 ambulances calling you with back-to-back CMED reports for each individual patient that's coming in. That's something they did at that scale that it did alleviate a ton of radio traffic on both sides, on CMED side and on fire alarm side.
And when you're eliminating that communication, you're eliminating confusion, and yeah, does that make sense?
It also gives the transportation officer the ability for accountability for family members too. That was going to be my question to MedFlight. So we have to be cognizant of the fact that there's family members attached to these people, and you have to have some sort of, not in the initial instance, but after, you have to be able to point them in some form of direction. You'd have to have somebody that's in charge of public information so that you would have some sort of information that you can relate to them through communication on the back end too. So that way we make sure that we take into account the people that are looking for their loved ones, because we know those are going to be the people that are panicking, and I'm sure that will be, the police officers will have to have some sort of, way to quell their concerns.
That's funny, I just wrote PIO and tapped Chief Orr's shoulder and said, the police do PIO better than any public safety agency in the city. So they have access to the mass communications stuff, and so I think that's important. And we haven't discussed is getting information out to calm the public and to give accurate information so that people aren't showing up on scene and telling people where to go. Having a family reunification center, maybe at, away from the incident, right, at Durfee High School, say, right, where we send public information officer, people from each agency, and have everyone show up there en masse to really keep people away from the scene and away from the streets around the scene where we're gonna be, you know, expecting apparatus to come and go and transport patients. So, so PIO is gonna be a huge role.
And protecting the family members from the press, right? Because they're always looking for that good news story. You want to give them respect. But I do think, I want to piggyback on what Chief Bacon said. I think that if we had an incident command and we had a large enough scale incident, there certainly is something to be said for having either a safety officer or a representative from the hospital so that you can say, well, right, so for short term, we're going to use our local hospitals, right? And then you move out. But once your hospital seems to have failed a little bit, you may be able to take some more so that you try to keep people as local as you can, and to have a representative there to be able to say, you know, okay, we got a little breathing room, right? Because we've had instances where we've had school bus accidents, and then you put all the kids in the bus, you take them to the hospital, you pull up to the front door, and the hospital looks at you and goes, really, right? So I think that having a person on scene as a representative from each facility in a unified command situation, especially if it's going to be an extended event, certainly makes sense.
Gene, what resources from the MBTA could we tap into if there was an incident where, I know there's no real manifest to who's on the train, but I know everything's done with either like a tap to pay type thing or the app. So is there anything on the MBTA side that could give us a roster of who potentially could be on that train?
I will ask that question. I have no idea. It's a fantastic question. So you can't go on an airplane without them knowing who's on it.
Right. So
Right?
or yeah, exactly.
That's true.
Unaccounted individuals.
Raising a very good point, that not everybody's going from Fall River to South Station.
And not everyone's honest in which kind of ticket they buy, so you could have a number of individuals who've only bought to, let's say,
Bridgewater.
Bridgewater or Quincy Center, and they're getting off at a further station.
No, that's a good point.
Or even just from an estimation level of how many people potentially could be on that train?
Yeah.
I think that's the FEMA train report that they did from in 2006, I believe. That was one of the things they said that was one of the challenges on a scene. And they said the conductor is typically the best source for that information, but it's not going to be 100% accurate.
No.
And if the conductor is even able to have that communication. When we did the training, they did say the conductor is the biggest resource of, you know, the engineer is the mechanical guy and the
driver, he's not paying attention to it, or she isn't, right? No, you're right. But I am curious, because so much of the purchasing is done via app, and that would also spell out which, you know, what zone they're going to, for example.
Well, if we can identify it as a viable lead, then so be it. If not, then we won't even bother.
Well, I'm going to check, and I'll get back to you.
Because if you made that initial call, you know, to stop the train, you could say, hey, can you give me a jingle back and let me know how many patients we potentially be dealing with.
Yeah.
What role will Keolis play in all this on emergency response?
They'll be there, they'll absolutely be there, and the transit police will be there after they get down Route 24. They'll definitely play some role. I don't know the extent. They're always on scene whenever there's anything.
Right.
But they rely on the locals to handle it, and should. I mean, you know, your community's best.
I know.
But they'll investigate it too.
When they have train derailments, Keolis is the guy that they are
right there
to
exactly.
get the trains and clean up the mess and all this other stuff.
Yep.
So another layer just to remember too is any rail event is an NTSB event.
That's
so
right.
it's federal law enforcement, and they have an incredible amount of law enforcement power. And being in proximity to how close we are to DC, they'd be on the ground here, you know, within 4 to 8 hours. And their expectation from a law enforcement standpoint is pretty significant. And they hold the authority over everything. Everything shifts once the NTSB gets on the ground. So that's just something to recognize from a fire and a law enforcement standpoint, that everybody is under their authority once they show up. As well as they control information very, very tightly. They have a system called Parties to the Investigation that the fire department, definitely the police department, MBTA would be a part of that party in that investigation, and they have very strict guidelines of what can be shared and what can't be shared. So which would frustrate like mayor's office and things like that, because they will not be part of that. and they won't be read into that, and they won't be allowed to have that information. So that's just something to recognize. That's kind of just how they run. So that's why they're so independent in that sense. So it's just something to be aware of in dealing with them. It can be very positive. It can be also very frustrating.
Yeah, it's like a plane crash, they take over right away, and everybody else stand
Same
back,
thing.
this is our scene.
Do they have,
Yeah.
do they provide any education?
When they show up.
Oh, so you learn by the city of
That's a good plan.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I wondered if they would provide some sort of, maybe if they have something like a PDF we could put out to our guys, if they encountered a situation where it came to that level, they would know what to expect.
There is some things that's available online through the NTSB website, very rudimentary, kind of explaining the part of the investigation system and things like that. But yeah, there's some of the availability from their website.
Yeah, because education is power, right?
Mhm. Yep, especially actually back to the, like, more so to the mayor's office as well as to the families, not necessarily, that'd be more doing EA having to deal with the families. But the families don't get any information, no one gets any information, and they have they basically put out a preliminary factual report within 10 to 14 days, and then there's no information that's shared publicly after that until they do it's called a tech review at 8 months, and then a final investigation findings come out once the NTSB full committee meets, and that's anywhere from a year to 2 years after the event is the typical final report that comes out. So it's a really long time, and no information is shared beyond those kind of benchmarks.
Then the, what do you call it, the redacted version?
No, they'll share out they share out the full report is public. It's for every plane crash, every trail derailment, shipping event. Those are always, that's a public kind of forum, but no one, it's never released before those kind of timeframes generally.
No, that's how MEMA works. If we have a situation within the city, MEMA wants to communicate with the EMA director. He doesn't want to communicate with the mayor or the city council. One person, one spokesperson who will go through the mayor, through the EMA director. You've had that happen in the city already. And the Region 2 director said, no, we don't want to talk to you. We want to talk to your EMA guy. And then through him, we'll talk to you. That's how they do it, because they don't want to have all kind of people all over the place. And that's how.
One thing the NTSB does have is they have a family liaison group that comes in specifically, let's say if it's a passenger train, that will deal specifically and is a great resource for the families. So if that is something that happens, that's something to reach out to the principal NTSB team that's on the ground to see if they're sending the NTSB family liaison, because they'll work with the families and give them resources and things like that that locally might not be available.
Right, so I feel like if an incident is large enough, our medical providers are gonna be medical providing, and we can't forget about the family side. So if you have somebody that can support you and is trained in how to do that family liaison piece, that's important. And as far as logistically trying to locate patients and,
Yep.
you know, God forbid.
And they're usually
lose
not, they
somebody.
don't show up for a number of days. That team usually is not, they're not a rapid response team.
Oh, so they take a couple of hours to get here?
They take a couple
days.
days probably to get in here, because they have to be activated by the NTSB investigative team that's on the ground first.
Oh, okay, so that's a, after.
Correct,
Correct.
yes.
Okay, I misunderstood, thank you.
Great information, thank you. Lieutenant Rosenberg, anything regarding hazmat concerns?
Not concerns, we're ready to handle whatever the scale it's gonna be, whether it's a passenger, we just worry about the 1,800 gallons of diesel, or if it ends up being a hazmat freight train that's involved. We've got public and private partners ready to assist.
Mr. Klein, your school is one of the probably the most concerned area that I have, and we did plans for you for many years. You have any, what's your concerns, Mr. Klein?
It's always communication. I think that's kind of the key today. Is who the public information officer is in charge, communicating, especially to the school families or to the neighborhood families. That's always a concern. Obviously, social media plays a factor, but really just working with every entity to make sure families are aware. If we have to go to an alternative site like Durfee, that it's publicly communicated. We do have resources within the school and off-site where we can communicate with our families and our stakeholders, but it's just working collaboratively with all organizations.
So, the gist of the meeting is what we just talked about, all these different ideas people have, and as Chief Bacon put together, like EMA has our plan as well. I think what we're looking at is a plan from everybody. In the event of something should happen, once again, if you're fictitious, we'll have it in the book, everybody knows what they have to do. You can send it via email, PDF, however you want to do it. So all these ideas that we all have, once again, if we have a situation, not just a training track, like the chief mentioned, but we have a plan in place in the books. Okay, this is where we have to go, contact this guy, contact that person, and we know who the contacts will be. We know what each department is going to do, which agency, and that was the purpose of this meeting. And I don't, do you have anything else, Chief? Or
Yeah, so everybody wants to take a look at this draft that I came up with, kind of working copy. Not right now. And within the next week or so, firechief@frfd.org is my email. Just email me back with anything that you see on there that jumps out at you, anything that you'd like to see added to it, anything that you, your organization could provide or would have expectations from us. That would be great, and I'll start to put together something a little more formal with Chief Aguirre. We'll try to put out even branches and just something that we can all look at and say, all right, we're in stage, right now we're in phase 1. And you'll have a copy of that and look and go, all right, this is what's happening right now. Right now we're in phase 4. You can have a look at that and know what's expected of you and what we are providing at that time. I think that's probably the most important thing that we can do, like I said, for an MCI event in general, right, or for a train-specific one, and we can start to build off of that for more specific incidents.
And perhaps every agency that's in the room, if you have an ability or need to be at the event or the best contact information for your specific agency, so that we would be able to, when we put together our dispatch plan or our strike, who do we notify, who's the best person to call? So that way you have that number and you're not trying to search through your cell phone and trying to figure out who that person's name is. So that we can create some sort of a list of everybody who's here at the table, who's an important person in an event, so that we would have immediate access to that information.
And then once we have all that, by next week, we'll schedule a follow-up meeting between the public safety departments here. We'll put together a better copy of this, disseminate it to you again, and we'll whittle it down and see what you think about that. And we'll hopefully within a month we can have a really strong working copy of what the expectations are and what we're all going to provide.
And I think from the city side, we have West Info, we're going to have a great fire department, police department, great EMTs, an outstanding EMS service, and I think that we support them in the things that they do. This was very eye-opening for me. I was a teacher at St. Michael's School, and I know when we had incidents there, what I had to do to make sure that the kids were safe. But to hear everything that everybody said, and this is what communities do. Communities support each other, work together, and we have great hospitals. I'm interested to see how much further this goes. And the city, we always have stabilization and money that if there's an emergency, we're going to make sure that our community is safe and give the funds that's needed.
Well, the LPC is all about emergency planning, and that's what we do. We say emergency planning, mitigate before it happens. And that's why that's pouring out here right now.
Perfect. That's great.
So that's why we have
Regular meetings only.
So you held it here, so I don't have to go out in the rain.
Anyone want to add anything to it? Anyone has?
Just because we have a great quorum here of both EMA and first responders.
Right.
So a lot of departments are getting drones. Drones, we don't like, because they scare the crap out of us. We've had across our industry in this year so far, there's been 17 drone encounters with air medical ambulances that have impacted none that have taken them out of the air yet. So for any of the departments that during an incident, things like that you fly a drone for awareness, just make sure you have communication if they know that air medical is coming in. Eventually there'll be technology, we are in the process of, there's some beta technology that will have drone detection in our aircraft. But that's still a ways away. So just be aware, again, and this is also the issue of a major event, you're gonna get lots of people that will pop up their drones.
I was gonna say, yeah,
Right.
that's the ones that you really have no control over,
And,
right?
you know, those are also the issue ones, and granted, I know state police, and we deal with the marathon, that they actually have ways to take drones out of the air, and things like that, so.
Is there a way to,
Pardon?
is there a way to do it?
There's a way to do that. I
Yeah,
don't know if it's
the
Vermont.
EMA pulses, they basically disrupt the drones, and they literally disable them in the
From
air,
a
and they fall off the
public safety
ground.
standpoint, you would just want us to bring them down?
Yeah, just not have them flying when we're coming in general, because we can't see them necessarily.
But you would have the information to give us so that if we had to call in your 16 helicopters, that you could give me the information on how to make sure that the airwaves are safe.
Yeah, basically, we're gonna assume that if law enforcement or fire has got drones in the air, everyone's communicating, they know helicopters are coming in, that you're gonna put them on the ground.
I'm talking about John Q. Public.
Oh, the public, that one's a difficult.
Yeah, there's nothing.
You know, if you see them, then you can notify us over the radio, over UTAC, that we communicate with the fire service, that, hey, we're seeing a drone in this area, you know, be advised, and things like that.
Okay.
Yep,
So,
absolutely.
You don't want to deal with a helicopter crash too?
yeah, no, neither do we. But thank you.
Anyone else want to add to this? So, like the chief mentioned, please get your thoughts back to us so we can put a plan together. Soon you can, the better it is. And I thank you all for taking time out of your busy day for being here.